Is Marvel Snap the best deck constructor? I spent a fair amount of time with the game to answer that question. I ended up spending more time with this game than others, but that was more so due to being busy working on my game, Sealed Monsters, delaying working on this video. For people familiar with Marvel Snap and wondering what playtime this feedback is coming from, I ended up reaching collection level 850. I'll start off by saying that Marvel Snap is unique in many ways. There are numerous aspects where it takes an entirely different approach than what's typical in CCGs. My focus for this video will be specifically the deck construction experience, but to make sure that everyone's on the same page, here's a brief explanation of what you'll be doing with the decks you create. The goal in Marvel Snap is to have the most power in 2 of the 3 locations after 6 turns. Each turn, players simultaneously select which location they'll play cards to, which add power to the locations. Players get additional energy to spend cards on each turn, allowing stronger and more cards to be played on later turns. Possibly the most notable aspect of Marvel Snap, as far as deck construction is concerned, is the card copy limit and deck size. You can only have 1 copy of each card in your deck. Normally I dislike singleton formats, as they usually only permit decks with loose themes, rather than a specific game plan. However, Marvel Snap's deck size is only 12 cards, and you will draw 9 by default in a 6-turn game. This means that not only is it still very possible to make decks with a specific game plan, it's actually easier to create a deck strategy that revolves around one specific card. By default, you have a 75% chance of drawing any one specific card in Marvel Snap, compared to the roughly 50% in games like Runeterra or Shadowverse. This makes each card inclusion or exclusion hold a lot more weight. If you change a card, you can quickly see the differences it's making within a few games. This does mean there's less opportunity for small tinkering on decks you're experienced with, but I appreciate the clearly impactful decisions and feedback that these small decks provide when first crafting a deck. Marvel Snap's games are also very quick. This, in combination with small deck sizes allowing you to get feedback on the majority of cards in your deck each game, means that deck iteration can happen very rapidly. You need to spend a lot less time in games to get data on how each card in your deck is affecting your performance. However, this data is muddied by the variance locations bring to the game. As mentioned previously, you win the game by having the most powerful in 2 of the 3 locations, and all locations have a special effect, drawn from a wide pool of potential options. Vormir destroys the first card each player plays there. If your deck has any way of moving cards, Kunlun gives +2 power to cards that move there. You can probably imagine that some locations, like Deep Space, which negates all card text, are incredibly disruptive, and locations like these can wildly swing the power of different cards in your deck in different games. You can see a good example here, where Camelot happens to be very beneficial for this swarm deck I am playing. I can easily play many 1-cost units with low power, have them all buffed up to 5 power, in addition to the deck's normal game plan of getting the bonus from Khazar. Meanwhile, my opponent didn't have any particularly low power units, so they got very little benefit from Camelot. Notably, the game commonly has featured locations, where a particular location has a significantly increased chance of appearing in games for a day. This means that even if you play dozens of games with a deck, if there was a featured location while you were testing, the results you get may be heavily skewed due to the frequency of that location, and may not be representative of how the deck would perform in absence of that location. These featured locations do theoretically encourage you to construct different decks that take advantage of them, which is nice if you're looking for additional reasons to construct new decks, but mind you, the featured location isn't guaranteed to be in games, so in general, you still just want a generally consistent deck. I personally find that the featured locations are more of a barrier to get accurate feedback on decks I was refining than a meaningful reason to try new deck concepts. Remember learning Bohr-Rutherford diagrams in school, and then later they teach you that they were a lie? Well, I'm going to sort of do that now. I've been saying that the goal in Marvel Snap is to win 3 locations. It's an apt description to quickly convey what you generally are wanting to do in the game, but it isn't really accurate. The real goal of Marvel Snap is to generate more cubes than you lose. By default, each game of Marvel Snap will generate you 2 cubes if you win, or will lose you 2 cubes if you lose. But if you surrender before the reveal of the final round, you will only lose 1 cube, and your opponent only gains 1 cube. Additionally, each player has the ability to double the amount of cubes that will be gained or lost in the game at any time, which gives the opponent one last opportunity to surrender at the current cube count before doubling is locked in at the next reveal. This cube mechanic affects the game a lot. Due to there being an incentive to surrender, many games end before the 6th round. This is another aspect that hinders your ability to get feedback on your deck. In most other games, even if you're pretty sure you're going to lose, there's no issue in playing out the game, providing you more opportunity to identify which aspects of your deck you could improve. But in Marvel Snap, you are penalized for playing a losing game to completion. This means to get feedback on how your deck performs late game, without harming your ranking, you often have to play many more games than you would in other TCGs. Additionally, given how significantly you can manipulate your cube gains and losses with this system of doubling and surrendering, it reduces the impact the deck you create has on your performance. There is an argument that deck piloting skill reduces the impact of deck construction in any game, and there is some truth to that. But I feel like knowing the ins and outs of your deck is closely linked to the construction of it. Marvel Snap's cube system feels more detached from the decks themselves, and thus makes it feel like what you construct has less impact than in other games. Coupled with the variance of locations, I'm sure a player skilled at understanding when to surrender or double could still get pretty far just playing a random assortment of cards, and completely disengage from the deck construction. On the other hand, the cube system provides some novel benefits. I spoke in the Lost Glitches video about the appeal of deck construction enabling big flashy plays. The cube system facilitates this. Say you have a really flashy combo that basically always wins you the game 1 out of 3 times. But if your combo doesn't happen, you basically always lose. This would give you a 1/3 win rate. In any other game, this wouldn't fly. You'd be losing more games than you are winning. But in Marvel Snap, you can surrender if your combo doesn't work out, and you can double when it does. In this case, each loss only loses you 1 cube, but if the doubling goes through, you will win 4 cubes when you win. When looking at an average 3 games you play, that means you lose 1 cube twice, then gain 4 cubes, for a net of 2 cubes. I certainly took advantage of this, and was pleased that some very flashy, yet somewhat inconsistent, combos still seemed quite viable in the game. Understand though, this isn't really increasing the number of decks that are viable, just shifting the value away from consistency. If you have a deck with an above 50% win rate, it still may perform poorly, if it's hard to determine when to double and when to surrender while playing it. I'm going to jump to card acquisition now, which like many other things, Marvel Snap takes a unique approach. The first thing to understand is Marvel Snap usually provides you with cards one at a time. There are packs that could include multiple cards, but most of the time it will just be an individual card in the pack and some other bonuses. In a typical CCG, I'd see these trickles of cards as a real detriment. Bundles of cards provide clear opportunities to make alterations to your deck, while singular cards often will be so inconsequential that it doesn't feel like a good opportunity or even worthwhile to edit your deck after each one. But in Marvel Snap, as I've covered previously, with the small deck sizes, individual cards can be quite impactful. So this individual trickle of cards works. The majority of your card acquisition, at least for a good while after you start the game, will come from the collection level track. Every turn you play in a game gives you 1 booster, and 5 boosters unlocks 1 collection level. Given games average about 5 turns, you are roughly getting 1 collection level per game you play. Early on the track, you can get a new card every couple of levels, but as you progress, this slows to needing upwards of 24 levels to get a new card. Cards are also sorted into series, and you will receive all of a series before the track starts giving you cards of the next series. There's 8 cards all players get at the start of their collection level track. The game lumps them in with Series 1, but they effectively are their own series, so I'm going to call them Series 0. Series 0 functions as a nice tutorial for new players. Every few games, it introduces a new deck concept by providing you with a simple payoff card for that concept. Spectrum for focusing on ongoing effects, Odin for focusing on reveal effects, and Khazar and Wolfsbane for focusing on 1-cost swarm strategies. None of these deck concepts are particularly deep. They primarily just ask players to have a bunch of cards that meet some condition. But that is exactly what new players need to jump into the process of deck construction. While I'm talking about introducing players to different deck concepts, I should note this filter feature Marvel Snap has in the deck constructor. This is really nice for new players. You've got a card that says it buffs all cards with ongoing abilities, and you have a button that just shows you all your available ongoing cards. This really facilitates a quick and smooth deck construction experience when building around these simple concepts. Sort features for deck archetypes like this is something I would like to see in more games. Unfortunately, this feature doesn't help much in Marvel Snap past making really intro decks. Ongoing and reveal aren't really archetypes, they are just types of abilities that synergize with a couple cards. Some of the other filters are more complete archetypes, but the filter is just doing a basic text search. It's not flagging cards that are part of an archetype. This became apparent when this card showed up in the move filter due to having the text remove in its effect. Ideally, I'd like to see a feature where this gives some suggestions as to what archetype a card generally fits into. I'd like to see something like Strong Guy included in the discard filter. His bonus power is contingent on having few cards in hand, and discarding is one of the easiest ways to enable that. When I'm constructing a deck focused on discarding cards, being reminded that he is an option through this feature would be nice. Anyways, back to talking about card series. Series 0 is great for introducing players to deck construction. Series 1 starts introducing the game's main overarching archetypes, move, discard, and destroy, while also introducing a selection of tech cards for countering certain strategies. This is where I felt the series system impeded deck construction. For each of the archetypes Series 1 introduces, it only gives a taste of the archetype, not enough to build a whole deck around it. Discard is the clearest example, with only 3 cards that are capable of discarding cards. One of these cards is unable to discard either of the cards that benefit from being discarded, so really you are down to 2 discard cards for this archetype, which just isn't enough to activate your discard contingent effects consistently and warrant constructing a deck around the concept. Other than Devil Dinosaur enabling a created card concept, I felt the only real options for decks I could construct were small iterations of basic ones introduced in Series 0. I should also mention that designing a deck around Odin, who repeats on-reveal abilities, one of the deck-defining cards introduced in Series 0, always felt disappointing early on. With a small collection of cards, you already are pretty limited by the on-reveal abilities available to you, but half of them don't even work with Odin. Odin costs 6, so under normal circumstances can only be played on the last turn of the game. A significant amount of on-reveal abilities apply effect next turn, or affect your hand of cards, which is usually useless unless you have another turn to use those cards. On top of that, 5 of the on-reveal cards you receive in Series 1 are detrimental, which means you specifically want to avoid combining them with Odin. Of the handful of remaining on-reveal cards that are useful to reactivate with Odin, most of them grant power to themselves. These are fine effects to reactivate, but if you already have a few cards at a region, after using all your energy on turn 6 to place a 9 power card at a single location, more power at that location is often redundant. You are at real risk of your opponent winning both the other locations, given you have invested so much into a single location. So with all that said, there ends up being 2 cards that are particularly beneficial for Odin to reactivate, with a handful of ones that are okay, but often redundant. This culminated in any attempt I made at making an Odin deck feel disappointing. There were too little combos to realize his flashy effect. This issue is in part due to how cards are designed. Cards are designed to be balanced, assuming they could be combined with any other card in the game. Cards like Angela need to be balanced with the understanding that players will be able to combine her with Kitty Pryde, even if they will always obtain Angela significantly earlier than Kitty Pryde. This means Angela is always very underwhelming when you first get her. I'm not trying to suggest cards should be balanced in another way. This is how you should balance cards if you want a long-lasting game. Of course, getting cards that require support you don't have is a reality in any card game. But variance in what you receive often means that you'll happen upon certain synergies that are viable well before you have a complete collection. Marvel Snap's unique collection system removes this variance, preventing any possibility you receive the support you need to craft a coherent deck with half the cards you receive in Series 1. On top of this, many Series 1 cards are tech cards, designed to counter certain opposing strategies. These are important cards for the game, and it makes sense to provide them to players early on, but they themselves rarely contribute to novel deck concepts. A significant percentage of Series 1 being composed of these also contributes to the feeling that Series 1 doesn't really allow further engagement with deck construction. It wasn't until I got to Series 2 that I felt I could really engage with the deck construction. Series 2 brought additional cards for the move and destroy archetypes, alongside some more double-edge cards that provided interesting challenges to construct around. With these, I finally felt I could broaden the deck concepts I was experimenting with. Prior to Series 2, anything I created appeared to lack viability compared to the alterations of the start deck, which just included a bunch of cards that stood on their own and needed little support. The final thing I will touch on is the rate at which you acquire cards. As mentioned before, you get about 1 collection level per game. The number of collection levels needed to get a new card gradually increases over time. During Series 1, even though I was getting a new card roughly every 4 games, this still felt pretty slow, due to new cards not really allowing new deck concepts. It jumped to every 8 games in Series 2, but despite this increase, this is where cards started enabling new deck concepts, and a card every 8 games felt like plenty to continually have stuff to experiment with as I played games. In Series 3, this eventually slows down to about 24 games needed for a new card. I have a decent collection to experiment with various concepts at this point, so this rate isn't terrible, but I've certainly felt the slowing of new cards to experiment with, and maybe that would catch up with me if I spent more time on the game. Events that are held regularly can also speed up card acquisition. I got over 100 collection levels from participating in one of these week-long events, and after the event, I certainly had a backlog of new cards to experiment with. If you could just play when these events run, the card acquisition would be more than sufficient to constantly allow you to try new concepts. But I did have to spend some premium currency to get the rewards from the event. I got that currency for free, but it involved completing daily quests. so it forces you to still play regularly at other times if you want to take advantage of events. So, is Marvel Snap the best deck constructor? Here's where I rank it. Small singleton decks and short game times are great at quickly creating impactful deck construction experiences. Plus, the card acquisition is pretty good. However, other unique aspects of the game muddies feedback and hinders deck iteration, holding it back from being the best. If you like deck construction and want to share deck construction with others, you should try the game Sealed Monsters. Sealed Monsters has been designed to be a roughly 1-hour deck construction board game that's easy to pick up even for players who have never touched a CCG before. Everything needed to play with 4 players is included in one box, and the deck construction happens during play. No one has to prepare anything before the game. You can try the game on Tabletop Simulator now, or in browser on screentop.gg. You can also follow the upcoming Kickstarter campaign and join playtests on the Discord. Links are in the video's description.